The healthcare environment nowadays is really complex and can be very confusing for patients. And you hear on the media uh, all different stories about whether or not something is good or bad for you. So you ask a great question about how you decipher all this information. So let's use a simple example. Everybody has heard of aspirin, of course. And you've probably heard for many years that aspirin is something that's good for you, something that can prevent heart attacks and strokes. And then most recently, we're hearing information that maybe aspirin isn't so good. Well, what does that mean? Do we change our opinion on aspirin? Were there some new findings? Well, when you dig into things, you find that aspirin hasn't changed, but the studies have looked at different questions. So years ago, back in the 1980s, when I was a young boy, we looked at things, whether or not aspirin prevented heart attacks and strokes in people who were at very high risk for these problems. And then we learned that aspirin and strokes prevented second heart attacks. And then we learned that aspirin has a huge impact in terms of keeping stents open. But we also learned that there's certain patients that may not be at very high risk. And how do you identify those patients? Well, a recent study came out that showed that if you get to age 70 and you don't have cardiovascular risk factors like super high cholesterol or never had a heart attack or a stroke, then the chances are that you won't have a problem during your lifetime. In that situation, aspirin won't do you any good. So a better question isn't have we changed our opinion about aspirin. The better question is, do we understand medicine and patient populations better? And the answer to that question is yes. Unfortunately, it sounds like from the news stories that maybe the opinion about aspirin has changed, but that is not true. What is true is that we now know how to apply this therapy better to our patients. And that's what we do at Encore Research Group. We understand our patients and we apply the best therapies in the most appropriate ways.